I'm Alex, and I've always prided myself on knowing Sarah better than anyone else. We'd been together for 9 long, wonderful years. 9 years of shared secrets, comfortable silences, and a trust that I believed was unbreakable. I thought our relationship was perfect, the kind that people write about in those endless Reddit threads celebrating true love. Yet, nothing could have prepared me for the unexpected shift that began one ordinary evening. It started when Sarah got ready to meet her friends. I remember watching her in the mirror as she applied her makeup with a precision that was almost ritualistic. But what caught my eye was the red dress she chose. A dress I'd never seen her wear before. The color was striking, bold, and at odds with the more subdued, familiar wardrobe I had grown accustomed to over the years. There was something almost magnetic about it, as if the fabric itself held a secret promise of a new side of her I'd never witnessed. I found myself questioning everything. Had I been blind all these years? The way she looked at herself, with that barely contained excitement in her eyes, suggested that this wasn't just another night out. It felt like a declaration, a silent hint that something was shifting inside her. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Sarah was on the cusp of change. A change I wasn't entirely sure I was ready for. In the quiet moments after she left, as I sat in our now eerily silent apartment, I replayed every detail in my head. The red dress was symbolic, a flag waving in the wind, challenging the status quo of our well-worn routine. I had spent almost a decade believing we had reached the pinnacle of our connection. Yet here I was, staring at the echo of something new and uncharted. That night, as I scrolled through old photos on my phone, I couldn't help but wonder if I had missed subtle hints before. Was there more to Sarah than the loving partner I had known all these years? Had I been so caught up in the comfort of our routine that I failed to see the rest of her, the vibrant, perhaps even rebellious side that the red dress hinted at? I decided then that I needed to understand what this sudden change meant. Was it merely a whim, a burst of spontaneity fueled by a desire to break free from our everyday life? Or was it a sign of deeper, more profound shifts brewing beneath the surface? The questions churned in my mind like a storm, leaving me both anxious and inexplicably excited for what might come next. So here I am, sharing this with you on Reddit, because sometimes the most unexpected changes come from the quiet corners of our lives. Changes that challenge our perceptions of love, identity, and the very essence of who we think we are. As I try to piece together the enigma that is Sarah, I can't help but wonder, will this red dress be the start of a thrilling new chapter, or the harbinger of a storm that could tear us apart? Only time will tell, and I'm left holding my breath, waiting for the next twist in our story. I was lounging on the couch, still reeling from the image of that red dress, when my phone buzzed. It was Lucas. His name flashed on the screen, and I answered with a hint of anticipation mixed with unease. "Alex, are you home?" he asked, his voice urgent and low. Before I could muster a reply, Lucas continued, "I just saw Sarah at a fancy restaurant. She was with another man." The words hit me like a bolt of lightning. In that split second, the room spun, and every memory from our 9 years together flashed before my eyes. I sat frozen, trying to process his words. Another man? My mind raced. Had I been so blind? The image of Sarah, radiant in her red dress, mingled with this new, painful reality. I didn't need to think twice. I told Lucas to wait, grabbed my keys, and headed out. The restaurant was about 20 kilometers away, a distance that somehow felt insurmountable given the emotional turmoil churning inside me. Driving through the dim evening streets, my thoughts were a cacophony of anger, betrayal, and confusion. Every red light and turn felt like a painful reminder that the woman I thought I knew was slipping through my fingers. I replayed every moment from earlier that day, the way Sarah had looked in that dress, the subtle changes in her demeanor, and wondered if I'd missed signs all along. As I neared the upscale restaurant, the sight before me was both surreal and shattering. Through the large glass windows, I could see Sarah, laughing and engaged in conversation with a man I didn't recognize. They were seated together, close enough that I could see the intimacy in their shared smiles and the ease in their body language. It was as if the universe had conspired to paint a stark contrast between the life I believed we shared and the one unfolding right before my eyes. Parking hastily in a nearby lot, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation that awaited. Every step toward the restaurant was heavy with anticipation and dread. My mind was a whirlwind of questions. Who was this man? What did he mean to Sarah? And, most importantly, where did I fit in this picture that was once my entire world? Standing there, outside the restaurant, I felt a mix of determination and vulnerability. The unexpected twist of fate had turned everything upside down, and I knew that whatever happened next would redefine the course of my life. With a pounding heart and trembling hands, I pushed open the door, ready to confront the truth, even if it shattered the perfect illusion I'd once held so dear. Walking into the restaurant felt surreal, like stepping into a parallel universe where everything I once knew had been twisted beyond recognition. I scanned the room, my eyes landing on Sarah almost immediately. There she was, sitting at a table in the softly lit corner, her familiar face now marred by the unmistakable glow of intimacy shared with a man I had never seen before. His name was Eric, a stranger whose presence seemed to mock every moment we had built over the past 9 years. For a few agonizing seconds, time stood still. Sarah's eyes widened when they met mine, and she fumbled for words. Her attempt at an explanation was lost in the sudden roar of my thoughts, a chaotic blend of betrayal, disbelief, and hurt that drowned out any sound. I could barely register her murmurs, the feeble protestations that fell flat against the weight of the truth. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. Sarah and Eric had been seeing each other for over 8 months. 8 months of deceit that I had never even suspected. Every laugh, every shared secret between us now seemed to be a lie woven into the fabric of our relationship. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the betrayal that cut deeper than any physical pain. I moved forward, my steps unsteady yet determined, as if compelled by a force beyond my control. The faces around us blurred into insignificance. I was no longer a passive observer of my own life. I had become a man driven by the need for answers. Approaching their table, the world around me faded, leaving only the glaring confrontation of betrayal in sharp focus. "Sarah, what is this?" I demanded, my voice thick with raw emotion. The restaurant's ambient chatter and clinking cutlery seemed to vanish, replaced by the harsh silence that now encapsulated our corner of the room. Her eyes darted around, desperately searching for an escape route, an out, a way to undo the damage of the moment. But as she opened her mouth to speak, her words disintegrated into a futile jumble, lost in the cacophony of my racing thoughts. Eric remained quiet, his expression unreadable, as if he had rehearsed this scenario in some twisted script. In that excruciating moment, every lie, every doubt I had ever harbored, solidified into undeniable truth. The red dress, the secret glances, the unexplained changes, all were pieces of a puzzle that now formed a damning picture. For 8 long months, Sarah had been leading a double life, and I had been blissfully unaware, ensnared in the comfort of what I believed was perfect. Standing there, feeling the weight of betrayal crushing my spirit, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. The perfect relationship I once thought I had was nothing but a fragile illusion, shattered by secrets too deep to fathom. As I looked from Sarah to Eric, I couldn't help but wonder what other surprises lay hidden in the shadows of our life. And in that moment, the journey I thought I knew splintered into a path riddled with twists, each one darker and more unexpected than the last. I spent the next few days in a haze, trying desperately to make sense of the mess that had become my life. In between bouts of anger and disbelief, I began to piece together what Sarah had been hiding. Late one night, while going through her digital trail, an act I never thought I'd resort to, I stumbled upon the damning evidence. It wasn't just fleeting messages or vague hints anymore. It was a series of receipts, screenshots, and calendar entries that painted a clear, devastating picture. Sarah had gone on what she called a business trip with Eric. But this wasn't some ordinary work-related travel. The receipts detailed a 6-day extravaganza at a luxury hotel, with every charge meticulously accounted for: room service, spa treatments, a lavish dinner, and even a few indulgent extras that together cost a staggering $5,000. Every night she had told me she was feeling sad, exhausted by work, and burdened by the pressures of her job. Now it was all laid bare. She had been lying to me, deceiving me every step of the way. I remember the cold shock of realizing that every tear I had shed over what I believed were her lonely, somber evenings was based on a fabricated narrative. Instead of battling loneliness or professional hardships, she was reveling in a secret escape with a man I'd never met until that fateful night in the restaurant. The financial evidence was irrefutable. The lavish hotel was a far cry from any modest business trip I could have imagined. It wasn't just the money, it was the betrayal of trust, the conscious choice to live a double life. In the quiet of our apartment, I sat there with the receipts spread out before me, each one a painful reminder of the truth. My mind raced as I thought of all the nights I had comforted her, believing that her sorrow was genuine, not realizing it was just a smokescreen for her real plans. The realization cut deep. For 6 long days, Sarah had been living a life parallel to mine, one filled with luxury, excitement, and lies. This revelation shattered what I thought was the foundation of our 9-year relationship. The perfect life I had imagined, the trust one had built, all lay in ruins. And yet, in the midst of this heartache, I couldn't help but wonder how deeply one can hide behind a mask of normalcy, convincing even the closest partner of one's misery while leading a completely different existence behind closed doors. As I sit here recounting these events, I'm still trying to grasp the full extent of the betrayal. It's a bitter pill to swallow, realizing that every good night and every tender moment was tainted by deceit. Now, I'm left questioning not only what our relationship truly was, but also who Sarah really is, and who I thought I knew. The dirty truth has a way of unraveling everything you believed in, leaving you to confront a reality far harsher than any fiction you could have imagined. I was numb for days after discovering the extent of Sarah's lies. The luxurious hotel trip, the false sob stories, the betrayal that cut through me like a razor. But the shock of that revelation quickly transformed into something darker, a thirst for retribution. I needed to understand every facet of this deception, and I wasn't going to let it go without digging deeper. That's when I turned to my brother, Lucas. Late one evening, I called him. "Lucas, I need you to do something for me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt inside. I explained everything. The red dress, the restaurant, the receipts, and every tear I had ever shed over Sarah's feigned sorrow. I begged him to find out more about Eric. I needed details. Who exactly was this man? What was his connection to Sarah? And most importantly, did he have any skeletons in his closet that would add insult to injury? Lucas, ever the loyal brother, agreed without hesitation. I felt a flicker of relief at having someone on my side, a teammate in this twisted game of deceit. He started digging, using every resource at his disposal, mutual acquaintances, social media deep dives, and even some discreet inquiries at Sarah's workplace. What Lucas uncovered was a revelation that left me reeling even further. Eric wasn't just some random fling or casual acquaintance. He was Sarah's colleague, someone who had worked closely with her for years. At 42 years old, Eric exuded an air of calculated confidence. His charm, it seemed, wasn't reserved solely for Sarah. I learned that he was not a man to be trifled with, someone who knew how to navigate professional circles and personal relationships with equal finesse. But the most damning piece of the puzzle was yet to come. Lucas's investigation revealed that Eric had been married for 13 years. 13 years. The man who was the architect of Sarah's betrayal was himself living a lie, deceiving his own spouse while engaging in an illicit affair with my Sarah. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, a man who had dedicated nearly a decade of his life to a seemingly perfect relationship, only to be betrayed by a woman who was entangled with a married man. A man who, in his own way, was no stranger to deception. As I pieced the information together, a bitter cocktail of emotions surged through me. Rage, disgust, and a perverse sense of vindication. The notion of revenge, once a distant whisper in the back of my mind, began to take a solid shape. I imagined confronting Eric, watching him squirm under the weight of his own duplicity. I envisioned exposing the hypocrisy of his double life, letting him feel even a fraction of the betrayal I had endured. But revenge wasn't going to be a simple confrontation. No, it needed to be meticulous, calculated, and cathartic. I spent sleepless nights formulating a plan that would not only expose Eric's secrets but also force Sarah to confront the consequences of her actions. Every detail Lucas shared was fuel to my burning resolve. I combed through the data he had gathered, memorizing names, dates, and connections, until I could picture Eric's life in stark, unforgiving detail. I couldn't help but feel that this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all the years of lies that had poisoned our relationship, all the nights I comforted her under false pretenses of sadness, and all the wasted moments of trust that now lay in ruins. Eric had become the embodiment of betrayal, and in my mind, he was just as culpable as Sarah. His deception was a stark reminder of how deep and complex the web of lies could be, and how sometimes the greatest hurt comes from those we least suspect. In that dark space between betrayal and vengeance, I vowed that I wouldn't let their lies continue to haunt my life. The plan was set in motion. I would gather every scrap of evidence, every whispered detail, and when the time was right, I would expose them both, not just to the world, but to the very people who had trusted them. Revenge, I realized, wasn't just about retribution. It was about reclaiming my sense of justice and dignity after years of being deceived. And so, with Lucas by my side and the damning details now laid out before me, I embarked on the next phase of my journey. A journey into the murky depths of betrayal, where every secret uncovered brought me one step closer to a reckoning that promised to shatter the facade of Sarah's perfect life once and for all. I couldn't shake the feeling that the real reckoning had just begun. The evidence was laid out in front of me. Undeniable, damning, and as cold as the receipts that detailed every extravagant moment Sarah had spent with Eric. It was time to bring their world crashing down. I took a deep breath and composed a message to Eric's wife. Every word I typed was a nail in the coffin of the carefully constructed facade Sarah had maintained for so long. I attached every screenshot, receipt, and digital footprint I'd gathered. I hesitated for just a moment, knowing that once this message left my phone, there was no turning back. Before I hit send, Sarah burst into the room, her eyes wide with a mix of desperation and regret. "Alex, please, don't do this," she pleaded, her voice trembling as if she had been holding back a torrent of guilt for far too long. "You have to believe me. There's more to this than you think." But her words fell flat. I couldn't find any trace of the woman I once trusted, only the stranger who had woven a web of lies so intricate that even my rational mind was starting to crack under the pressure. "Sarah," I said, my voice rough and detached, "I don't believe a single word you're saying anymore." I could see the panic in her eyes as she tried to approach me, perhaps to make me see the truth of her own remorse. But it was too late. Every plea, every tearful apology was already drowned out by the echo of her betrayal. Without another word, I pressed send on the message, sealing their fate with the click of a button. I sat there in stunned silence, the weight of my actions settling like an anchor in my chest. The dim light of my apartment seemed to grow colder, harsher, as if reflecting the severity of what I'd just done. I waited, feeling the minutes drag on, each second a slow-motion reminder of the irreversible step I'd taken. Exactly 5 minutes after sending the message, my phone rang. The screen displayed an unknown number, a single, uninvited intrusion into my already shattered world. My heart pounded as I hesitated before answering. The line clicked, and I was met with a silence that was both eerie and foreboding. Then, a voice emerged. A voice I didn't recognize but that carried an unsettling calm. "Alex," the stranger said, his tone measured and almost gentle. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." His words sent a chill down my spine. For a moment, I wondered if this was some twisted form of retribution, some unexpected twist I hadn't anticipated. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice barely concealing the surge of anger that threatened to burst forth. "You'll understand soon enough," he replied cryptically. "Just know that some truths are far more dangerous when they're exposed, and the consequences, well, they're irreversible." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. This wasn't just about Sarah and Eric anymore. It was as if my decision to expose their lies had somehow rippled out into a much larger, darker network of consequences. "Don't play games with me," I snapped, frustration mingling with the remnants of betrayal. But the stranger's tone didn't waver. Instead, he continued, "You've just opened a door that you can't close. I suggest you prepare yourself for what comes next." The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the phone in disbelief. Questions swirled in my head. Who was that? How did he know? And what exactly had I unleashed? The evidence I'd sent wasn't just a simple act of vengeance anymore. It had become the spark that ignited a powder keg of secrets and hidden alliances. I recalled the meticulous details I'd gathered, the painstaking effort that Lucas had put into unraveling their double lives. Now, it seemed there were forces at work that extended beyond my personal vendetta. Sarah's earlier pleas echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder that perhaps she, too, was caught in a labyrinth of deceit that even she couldn't fully control. But her regrets were too little, too late. I had crossed a line that, once breached, meant that the destruction of her world was inevitable. And in that destruction, I could only hope that justice, however twisted and painful, would prevail. As I sat there, the fallout of my actions beginning to seep into every corner of my mind, I couldn't help but wonder, had I just traded one nightmare for another? The answer was hidden in the static of that unknown call, a mystery that promised more chaos and revelation than I had ever bargained for. My life, once anchored in the certainty of our past, was now adrift in a sea of uncertainty, betrayal, and the haunting echo of consequences yet to unfold. I sat there, stunned and numb, as Eric's voice filled the silence on the other end of the line, a voice I hadn't expected at all. For a fleeting moment, I thought I was about to hear the distressed tone of a betrayed wife, but instead, the low, measured cadence of Eric himself cut through the tension. "Alex," he said, each syllable dripping with menace. "You have no idea what you've just unleashed." His words were cold and deliberate, carrying a threat that made my skin crawl. Before I could form a response, Sarah's frantic whisper broke in from behind me. I turned sharply to see her eyes wild with panic. "Alex, please, stop this. Don't do it," she pleaded, her voice cracking with raw fear. The desperation in her tone was unmistakable, but it was too late for second chances. Eric's threat continued, each word a heavy promise of retribution. He warned me that my actions would bring ruin, not just upon me, but on everyone connected to this web of lies. As the tension mounted, Sarah's panic escalated into a confession that shattered everything I thought I knew about her. I never meant for it to go this far," she stammered, tears streaming down her face. In that broken moment, she revealed the truth that had been hidden in the darkest corners of our shared past. 2 years ago, she had helped Eric cover up an accident that had claimed a life. The shock of her admission hit me like a freight train. I remembered distant whispers, half-forgotten news snippets of a fatal accident that had been swept under the rug, a scandal never fully resolved. And now, here it was, the final piece of a puzzle that I hadn't even known existed. Eric's tone turned venomous as he sneered through the phone. "You really think you're in the right here, Alex? You loved a liar, a woman who painted herself as the victim while hiding a monstrous secret." His words reverberated in my mind, each one a stab of betrayal deeper than the last. The man who had once seemed nothing more than a faceless participant in Sarah's infidelity now stood revealed as the mastermind of an even graver deceit. A man whose duplicity stretched far beyond an extramarital affair. For a long, agonizing minute, I was caught between the fury of betrayal and the crushing weight of this new, darker revelation. I had built my life, my identity, on the love and trust one thought I shared with Sarah. But now I saw that every tender moment, every whispered secret, was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. The woman I had adored for nearly a decade had not only deceived me about her fidelity, but had also been complicit in a cover-up that changed lives irreparably. Eric's threats escalated, his voice laced with a promise of vengeance. "You have no idea what you've done, Alex. Some doors, once opened, are impossible to close. You're meddling in affairs that will destroy you." Each word cemented the reality that I was no longer the victim of a simple betrayal. Instead, I had unwittingly become entangled in a dangerous game, one where the stakes were life, death, and irreversible consequences. As I listened, Sarah's panic transformed into desperate pleas. "Alex, I'm so sorry. I was scared and I thought I could fix everything. I never wanted to hurt you." Her voice, trembling and filled with remorse, was a stark contrast to the icy certainty in Eric's tone. Yet, every word from her now only served as further evidence of how deeply her lies had run. In that heart-wrenching moment, I realized that the woman I loved was nothing more than a stranger cloaked in the guise of a partner. A stranger whose every smile and sorrow had been nothing but a carefully rehearsed act. It dawned on me then, I had loved a woman I never really knew. All the years of passion, trust, and dreams had been built on a foundation of deceit, concealing truths too dark to bear. My heart shattered further as I acknowledged the bitter reality. My pursuit of revenge, my desire to expose their lies, had only served to unveil the monstrous duality of the person I thought I loved. In that final, shattering moment, as Eric's threats and Sarah's terrified confessions collided, I was forced to confront the ultimate betrayal. Not only had Sarah betrayed my trust, but she had also buried a secret so damning that it redefined every memory we had shared. The red dress, the late-night lies, the hollow promises, all were symbols of a truth I had been blind to. I had loved and lost a woman whose true self was buried under layers of deception and guilt. Now, with Eric's ominous words echoing in my ears and Sarah's tearful apologies lingering in the silence, I stood alone in the ruins of what I once believed was our perfect love story. The shock of her past, the depths of her betrayal, and the chilling certainty that I had been a fool to trust left me with a heart heavier than I could ever imagine. A heart forever scarred by the revelation that sometimes, the person you love the most is the one you never truly knew.